Welcome to Generations, a program for seniors, people who know seniors, or people who someday are going to become seniors. I'm David Lepaco, and I'll be your host for this episode. And in a moment, I'll introduce our topic for the day. But first, let's check in with our co-hosts. And since we are, regrettably in my view, heading into the final weeks of the summer, I'm going to ask each of them what's on your summer to-do list that you still need to make time for. And in no particular order, let's start with Beverly Crosby, who has been a periodic panelist on this show, a previous host of this show, and our go-to technical person for editing and production of this program. Beverly, how are you doing, and what's still on your summer to-do list?
Hi, David, and everybody else. Oh, it's great to be here. Well, I just finished a 6-day roundabout. What do you call it? I don't have the right word, but anyway, 6 days with my grandchildren. They had a summer vacation with grandma for 6 days. So I think I'm in order for a recoup day and cleanup day. But anyway, it was great. It was wonderful. I've never taken that much time straight like that, and it was absolutely wonderful. You know, the fair, they had a camel out there, wonderful. And so anyway, I have one more big event coming up. It's just really fun, and it's going back to my home state and for one of my cousins' 62nd or 65th anniversary. All of my cousins will be there. And I have a lot of cousins, and that is going to be so much fun. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Next, let's go to Michael Rosberg, who is a founding person for this program. He is the brainchild of this program and deserves all the credit for that. But he's also periodically a co-host on this show. Michael, how are you doing today, and what's on your summer to-do list that you haven't taken care of yet?
Well, today is going fairly well. Throughout my life, I've kind of run as a pastime and actually once ran a marathon. But as I've aged, I've run less and less and then kind of resigned myself to just walking for the most part. But what I would actually like to do is get out there and get serious about this again and actually be able to jog 1 mile. And that would be quite an accomplishment for me, but I'm not there yet, but still got a month or two to go.
I think you can do it. I used to have a next door neighbor who at 75 years old ran 5 marathons that year.
Wow.
So we're going to have to think if we're 75, we can at least run 1 mile. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yes.
Next, we have Susan Strauss, a longtime Generations panelist, a co-host of our other cable program, It's a Woman's World, and she's filling in today. We have a couple people who are gone. Susan, how are you, and what's on your summer to-do list yet?
Well, I have some more reading to do, but my main to-do list is to heal after my back and so forth have gone kaput. And I'm used to going about 3 miles of power walking, and I'm not even up to a mile yet. So that's my goal is I'd like to get back to 3 miles. It's not going to happen, but I'm easing on in. That's my goal.
Yeah, well, I think the main thing is to stay in motion, as my physical therapist used to say, motion is lotion. So
Yeah.
good. So finally, our most colorful member of the panel, I think, as you look at the screen, Rashida Jenkins is with us in a lovely orange and blue motif. Rashida, how are you, and what's still on your summer to-do list?
Well, thank you for your kind words, Dave. I am blessed. Thank you. Believe it or not, I have a son in school and I need to go school shopping. So that is on my to-do list to get out there and do some school shopping. So.
Oh, it's been a while for that. I have no idea what you even have to get these days, but
oh
good
boy
with that. Well, thank you all. Today, we're going to try to focus on a specific question that we should all be able to relate to. It all begins with the idea that who we are today is closely related to who we were as kids. Indeed, many would argue that our first few years of life profoundly influence what happens to us as adults, and that our life script is pretty well written early on. So our question for today is, how did your childhood and school years influence what work you did in later life. What has been the impact of your childhood on later life decisions that you made? And so I'll open up the floor to anybody who'd like to offer some thoughts on this matter.
Well, I'll start. I was trying to remember back, way back, as you know, to my earlier years. Some people remember when they were 2, 3, 4 years old. I don't remember those years. I remember a couple things I did, but I really don't know how old I was. Um, but mostly, yeah, I don't remember that. I do remember that I loved playing by myself. I had an older brother. I grew up out in the country in the farm, so it wasn't like there were neighborhood kids around. But I liked just being in my own little space underneath the lilac tree. I had a great little hiding place. I'd go sit there and I'd take my little china dishes out there and my little toys out there and I'd play under this lilac tree. But I always liked, I like playing on my own. And I'm to this day, I've been working on my own most of my life. So, that definitely has carried over. The other thing is that I always, when I got a little bit in my, say, after 7, when I got to be about 12, I used to draw a lot. And I used to cut, we had Sears and Penny catalogs. So I used to cut these, I would cut out things, clothing, a bedspread for the bed. I would decorate my house by cutting out little pictures of these different things. And okay, that goes in the bathroom, that goes in the bedroom, that goes in the living room, And so I've always liked art, color, and organizing. And when I was about 12 years old, I drew a dog's face on a sunflower. Believe it or not, this was I don't know why I drew a dog, had no idea. But anyway, what happened was our our newspaper, our daily newspaper had a contest called KP Dick. KP Dick said, draw a picture on a sunflower and you will get a prize. Somebody's going to win. Okay. And that went around our whole metro area. It wasn't that small. So I drew a dog's face. I remember my mother saying, why would you put a dog on there? You draw so many other things, like even a horse. So why would you put a dog's face? I don't know. It looked pretty good to me. Well, I won and I got to go to the newspaper. I had my picture taken. They put my picture in the newspaper. I won 3 books. And after that whole incident, my uncle brought me my very first oil painting set. And I tell you what, that was the big deal. I grew up in, we didn't have a lot of extra, money for extra things, I should say. Everything went into the farm. So anyway, getting an oil paint, my first oil painting set was really a big thrill. So that started those 2 things started my art career, I think. And then in high school, I continued to take art, had an art scholarship, followed through doing art in photography and then eventually in video, But so those are the things that influenced me to do the type of work I did throughout my life.
Very cool. I didn't have any of that kind of art influence of any sort. It was influence in other directions. We can get to that later. Thank you, Beverly. Anyone else want to talk about their formative years and how they impacted later life?
I will. Beverly has some very specific reminiscent times for her. I don't know that I do when I'm that young. I remember that I always had playmates that were in our neighborhood and we would play outside. One of the games we played was Boys Catch the Girls. And that was something that we did. It was just, you had to just grab an arm or something. Then in the house we were renting before we bought our house, upstairs in the bathroom, there was a huge closet that you could go in and shut the door and nobody knew you were in there. So my girlfriend and I would go in there and I don't even know what we would play, but we just thought it was the neatest thing. It had a light and we could just sit in there and talk. And then I remember being in Brownies, and really the only thing I remember being in Brownies is how we got to be in the parade, and we thought that was just really cool. Junior high, I don't remember that much, couple of teachers, but it's senior high that I have my most fondest memories, and that I think really weaned me into my career. I loved science, and I went into nursing originally, and I was a cheerleader. And I think about that now because I do a lot of, well, I'm retired now, but I did a lot of training. And whether cheering actually led me to training, I don't know, but the skills are pretty similar, except you don't yell as much. And then I was a majorette in the band, and I like music and I like dancing. And so the majorette didn't really dance, but we were in the parade and we did it. I mean, those were some fun things for me. My dad was a podiatrist and a foot surgeon. So my interest in science tended to focus in on, human science or biological science. And I thought at first I wanted to be a physician. And then I remember my mom and dad saying, why do you want to do that? You can't go to school full time and raise a family. You know, back then it was all about being a family member. And my dad said, why don't you be a nurse? And I'd never really thought about being a nurse. And I thought, well, I then wanted to be a nurse in the worst way. So the classes that I took in high school were all, chemistry, etc., biology, dissecting frogs, etc. And that was what I set my life to, was being a nurse, and got into nursing school. But then I went back to school and picked up a master's degree, and then went back again and picked up a doctorate. And the master's degree was in health sciences, but my doctorate was in organizational leadership. So that went into yet a different avenue. And then I had written a book or two, and I got a call from an attorney if I could please be an expert witness for a lawsuit. And I thought, I don't even know what an expert witness is. And he told me, and I said, I am no expert. And he said, well, you're the only one that's written a book on it. I thought, well, you're in deep doo-doo if you think that makes me an expert. It does not. Well, that turned into a whole other part of my career then, which was doing more writing, and which I don't like to do, and then doing expert witness work for different lawsuits. I think I've done just about 50 of them. Many of them were in K through 12, and then some were in post-secondary, and then the majority were probably in the workplace. I found it fascinating. I thought the law was fascinating, even though I don't know where I got that from my childhood. And after a while, though, it was stressful, and I ended up getting hypertension, and they said, don't do anything stressful anymore. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm not doing any more lawsuits. I was ready to quit. I really was ready to quit. And now all I do is webinars, and I can do it in my jammies or in my tank top. And except today, Beverly makes me dress a little differently. And so that's that. Now I'm retired, other than doing occasional webinars. And I got sick about 2 years ago. So I'm really trying to get my health back. It's so slow. But my high school, I loved high school and loved being around all of the kids. And we were a very close-knit group. In fact, we all turn 80 next year. So we're planning an 80th birthday party. And yeah, we have a good time. So I loved my childhood. I was close to my family, and high school was phenomenal.
Well, quite a story. One thing that becomes clear to me, and maybe other people as well, based on what you said, there's no way I would have been down that path. There was nothing in my childhood that would lead me in that direction. And it was a unique passage for you that I simply could never experience. It just wasn't where I was destined to be.
Well, the nursing led to me taking a teaching position in vocational ed, and you had to be a registered nurse to teach what I was teaching. I found that I dearly loved teaching, And so then I was doing some teaching, working as a part-time, I guess you'd say, professor in college. And of course, that's doing a lot of quote unquote training. And because a lot of my work was in the area of illegal sexual harassment, that got me into legal issues and got me into testifying in court and doing more writing. It does make sense actually to me, but I can see where it maybe wouldn't to others.
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense for you. It's not where I could have gone.
Yeah.
Let's look at Michael Rosberg for a moment. You want to go back into your dark past life and try to figure out how it determined who you became today?
Well, I had a couple of different classes in mind that I took, and you took both of those classes, Dave. I don't know if they had the same impact, but I think one of them did. The first was in junior high school when you and I took the thing that boys take instead of home ec, shop class. And I found in there that I just kind of didn't have any natural skills for that kind of work. They would give us tasks and I wouldn't do them particularly well. And then about 7 years later, let's say 9 years later, when I finished my sophomore year at college, I dropped out. It was during the Vietnam War. I had become more or less of a hippie, and I was living in an apartment where the landlord said he ran a burglar alarm installer's business. And he said, "How would you like to be an assistant to my employee here?" And so I spent about a year and a half trying to become a burglar alarm installer's assistant. And after a while, he said, "Well, you just gotta kind of get going here," and it never quite worked out. So I quit that, and then ended up in the city of St. Paul. The second class Dave and I took together that had a great influence on both of us, and especially on Dave, I believe, was debate in high school. And what I learned there is that I'm not a particularly excellent expressive person. I'd always get the comment, "Show more emotions when you speak," but I was good at getting things organized. And that included like going to the library and looking up different facts and writing them down on little debate cards. And so what I did have was the most debate cards of any of the debaters on the A team. So kind of doing research, getting things organized was a skill I took into Parks and Recreation. And so I ended up being a community ed coordinator where you're organize activities in a particular community. I worked in the Highland Park area. And then after that, I was switched to the downtown office, and I did things including writing grants and working with the overall senior programs for St. Paul Parks and Recreation and getting those organized. So I did just learn quite a bit about myself, and I think it was helpful. It was very helpful.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And we did go to school together. And it occurred to me that we could look at what didn't happen in our childhoods that helped determine our future path. And you mentioned handiwork, shop class and stuff like that. I get no instruction at home on how to fix or do anything. It was clear I was never going to be able to go down that path because no one was guiding me in that direction. On the other hand, the debate part, a lot of people out there will talk about how debate was the formative experience in their life. And a lot of these people are U.S. senators or TV celebrities or people you know where debate was the critical skill, the critical activity in their growing up in school. So, Rashida Jenkins, you want to add to this conversation and talk about your childhood and how it's had an impact?
Absolutely. Well, like Michael, I enjoyed shop class. So growing up, my father would often buy different things that you had to assemble, and he'd bring them home and he'd give them to me. And he'd say, "Go ahead, put it together, and I loved assembling things so much so that I became a union carpenter and then a union laborer. And I have assembled many of the buildings around Minnesota, including the Viking Stadium, the Twin
Oh, wow.
Stadium. Yes, and so I enjoyed that career for about 12 years. And then I sustained a traumatic brain injury, and so I had to kind of reinvent myself. And remembering back, I used to get horrible marks at school about talking too much. I always talked too much, and my teacher would always say, she's bright and she's wonderful, but she always talks too much, and she's a busy bee, and she's always in everyone else's conversations." Well, as you can see, it has worked out for the best. I am now a facilitator with the Northside Achievement Zone here in North Minneapolis. And so a lot of things have come full circle. Things that I got in trouble for as a youth have become my career now. And I just wrote a book, and so I've become an author and a speaker. And so all of the things that I got in trouble for as a kid, I'm doing now and enjoying. So
Great.
definitely come full circle. Yes. And I also was a cheerleader too, Susan.
Oh,
So I can align
there we
with that
go.
as well. Yes. So absolutely.
It shouldn't be lost on any of us as you think about these things, even though we're kind of past, many of us are kind of past that point where grandparents or not too parental, but the influence that parents can have in setting up a climate and a culture in their household with the kinds of activities, the kinds of stimulation that people get, have a huge impact on how kids turn out. And in my case, it was a literary thing where my dad subscribed to probably 25 different magazines. We had a study at home with books in it. And we could get Life and Look and Saturday Evening Post and Reader's Digest and Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist and National Geographic and just about every magazine you could possibly imagine. I don't know that he ever read them all, but it was that kind of world of ideas place. That's where I got my influence, not from learning how to fix a carburetor or something like that. No one ever told me how to do that. Other thoughts that we have here in our final 5 minutes.
Well, Dave, what about you?
Well, as I'm saying, probably the main thing was that I grew up in a world of ideas. The idea of being an advocate. My parents were very much involved in the labor movement, the AFL-CIO federated unions. And so it wasn't likely that I was going to get a big corporate job as a CEO somewhere. I wasn't on a business track. And in the end, it just seemed like trying to influence other people, either through politics or journalism or teaching, was going to be the way that I was going to go. And there was kind of a fork in the road where it was either journalism or teaching. I decided I was tired of meeting strict deadlines, which is an inherent part of journalism. Just tired of that. It gets to be a real grind. So I went into teaching where things are a little bit more laid back. But that's kind of the long and the short of it. That it was out of that type of environment that I came out of. Beverly.
Yeah, I'd like to mention I had accidentally come across a film that I thought was very interesting. It's an English film, and it's a series of the writer took children at the age of 7, and they interviewed these children. And there were, I think, I don't know, 10, 15 children, boys and girls. And every 7 years, they went back and interviewed them again. So 7, 14, 21, 28 onwards. And the writers said, give me a child of 7 years, and I can tell you a lot about what that person's going to be like. And when you watch the series of films, you actually see that. You actually see how these 3 girls were best friends. Well, guess what? 50 years later, they're still best friends, but their personalities were still the same as what they were when they were a child at 7, and their careers developed from those early childhood traits. The film is actually called 7 Up, but it's an English film and it's a series, so it's something that I remember watching. It took a week or so just to watch, but it was so intriguing that there is so much influence. Our early childhood years really do help us become who we are.
Yeah. And of course, it goes beyond career choice. It's our personality, our sense of self, all kinds of different things. I grew up in a Finnish household where in my paternal grandparents' house, Finnish was the first language. Finns are not particularly effusive. They tend to be a little bit introverted. They tend to be a bit shy. I picked up on some of those things. I didn't talk a lot about my feelings because we weren't trained to do that in a Finnish household. You know, you just kind of hung in there and you had a stoic kind of presence about yourself. And so that's another thing that I inherited from my family, good, bad, or otherwise. And so I think we all have those scripts that are multifaceted. It's not just what job we go into, but a bunch of other things as well. Susan, you're nodding. You want to care to add to that?
Well, I was just listening to your background and I thought, boy, doesn't that make sense? I have some Scandinavian as well as Scotch Irish. And we used to laugh about Scotch Irish and the kinds of personalities that came from those countries. And, you know, they were not quiet. They spoke their mind. And you go back to that, and I'm not quiet. I speak my mind. And I thought maybe as I'd get older, that would calm down a little bit, but it really hasn't. So I think it's interesting you brought that up. I don't know if we always think about that. Our parents and our grandparents, my grandfather, on his death certificate, it said that he was born in a South Dakota shanty. He was born in a shanty. I didn't even know what a shanty was. I had to ask my mom. Oh, not good, she said. They didn't have any money at all. And then I think about them going through the Depression and what that's made a huge difference on my mom. And she would say she was frugal. I would say it in a little bit different word than frugal, maybe a cheapskate. And she passed that on to me, but I'm not that way. So she's, oh, Susan, I don't know how you can spend money like that. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, going back in our parents' time and our grandparents' time.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, we're down to our last 60 seconds here, and time has just kind of whizzed by. I know what you mean. My mother grew up in the Depression. That had a big impact. She was still cutting 10-cent coupons out of the paper for a can of corn, even though
Yes,
she didn't have to do that anymore.
and the
Uh,
green stamps.
I think what we've established here is that everyone has their story and it comes from somewhere. It didn't just happen by accident. And so when you see someone like Drew Barrymore, it shouldn't be hard to understand that she comes from a family that has a Hollywood tradition, and that's how she became an actress. And in the same way, each of us are an extension of our families. So I think at this point, all we can do is probably say farewell for the moment. Thank you all for your contributions, Susan, Michael, Rashida, and Beverly. And we hope we will see you again on another episode of Generations.